The problem with India is that we don't really have a lot of good quality audio content available. So I think it's more of a supply issue today. And as we kind of build more and more supply, the larger part of this country, last 7-8 years, the native speakers looking for more content on their native language, and they wanting to see content which is curated, value additive, and perhaps happy to pay for it, right? Is what I would say is the reason for the consumption or the consumer to kind of go there. Large part of that consumption pattern is relatable stories of people who have made it big, and how can they make it big? How can they become better at what they are doing in different personas of being a father, mother, good son, a good investor, and things like that. What will work for platform companies or distribution companies is the insights of multiple kinds of audience and what will work and what will not work, and then partner with the content creators to kind of give them those insights and use those creative things to distribute on their platform.
Hello and welcome to a very special podcast series, Unusual Suspects. I'm your host, Gaurav Chaudhary. This is a series about unraveling stories of entrepreneurs, investors, and businesses and professionals who are disruptors, yet not in your face. Their disruptions have consistently delivered on the purpose and the mission they embarked on. Their values are as strong as the mission. While they're ruthless in pursuing their ambition, they don't stray from being leaders who are not just admired for the vision and relentless pursuit, but also for how they're building an ecosystem of believers who consistently push the boundaries. They allow principles to take precedence over ad hocism. For them, profitability is as important as scale, creating and leading new categories and innovations. In each episode, I speak to one such leader, talking to her or him or them about their businesses, lives, inspirations, interests, challenges, pivot moments and turning points, successes, failures, agonies, and ecstasies. It is as much about the personal life stories as about the entrepreneurial journeys and little joys too. Unusual Suspect streams on Earshot.in, Spotify.com, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, MoneyControl.com, and a host of other podcast streaming platforms. For this episode, I'm delighted to have Prateek Jain, Principal at Fundamentum Partnership. He leads Fundamentum's Bharat apps and subscription economy portfolio and is a board member at KukuFM. Fundamentum Partnership is an India-focused venture capital fund co-founded by veteran entrepreneurs like Nandan Nilekani, Sanjeev Agarwal, and Ashish Kumar. Prateek, a Bachelor of Engineering from the IIT Kharagpur, possesses over a decade of extensive experience of working in the e-commerce and on-demand services industry in India. Welcome to Unusual Suspects, Prateek.
Thank you, Gaurav. Thank you for having me.
Prateek, let me start off with a very basic question. It is about audio streaming, and this is something that I also do as a day job. How far are we from becoming matured in that space, bringing it closer to, say, a market like the US or China?
The way I think about this concept of audio streaming is that India would perhaps be a natural fit for something like an audio streaming, because my understanding is that many of the job profiles in India, right, need physical attention, but does not require a lot of mental attention, right? So that means that you cannot be, involved looking at a screen, but you can consume over audio, right? The problem with India is that we don't really have a lot of good quality audio content available. So I think it's more of a supply issue today. And as we kind of build more and more supply, what you were yourself doing at Gaurav, and what my, one of our investee companies called KukuFM is doing, I think that will be a good marriage between the audience. There is already a large audience for it, and good supply will kind of enable that market to become larger. Today, we don't have a lot of supply in vernacular language, in the native language, right? Don't have a lot of supply of content in the form of what the audience is looking for. I don't think India is a podcast led uh, supply is what demand is looking for, because India is looking for more, I would say, um, entertainment, infotainment, edutainment kind of a category, right? So two people talking to each other may not be the best content out there for the large audience, but it's more storytelling, maybe even giving a lot of knowledge through stories, right? So in my opinion, we always had an audience. Our country has, I would say, propensity to kind of really like this format of content. We don't really have a very large library of content, and that is what people like yourself and Kuku is trying to do to kind of expand this market.
I'm glad you said that, because as you rightly pointed out, audio and digital audio, because it's non-screen based, so it has a lot of advantage. It keeps your hands free, it keeps your eyes free, and it enables you to listen whatever you want to, whenever you want to. So it kind of dismantled the barriers for intermediation, unlike appointment listening on radio, for instance, which has the intermediary of a programmer. So if you have missed the 9 o'clock bulletin or missed the 9 o'clock show, you have missed it altogether, which is not quite the case in audio streaming, because it kind of empowers the listener whenever she wants to, whatever she wants to, and whatever length she wants to. And there are certain uniqueness about the Indian market as compared to, say, the US or China, which are essentially single language countries. But India is a multilingual country in a much more diverse sense than probably many outside India cannot even imagine. Just to give you an idea, we have 22 constitutionally recognized languages, but there are more than 800 languages, 834 around thereabouts, that were spoken by about 10,000 people. And these include dialects, or languages like Bhojpuri, which are not constitutionally recognized as official, but are spoken by hundreds of millions of people, not just in India, but also across the world, which is where I think the potential of the audio market and audio streaming content market actually lies, which is why I think the tier 2 and tier 3 markets is where the real, the demand for this kind of content is going to come up from. And what, since you have been on the board of KukuFM for a long time now, and it is one of your investing companies, what are the factors do you think that have led to increase in consumption of such content in tier 2 and tier 3 cities and also in villages? Prateek?
Yeah. No, Gaurav, thank you. That's a very interesting question. See, in my view, internet has now been around for 20 years in India. And if you just look at the geo phenomena, which kind of really, gave this internet access to almost everybody in this country, has been around for about 7-8 years, right? So we are playing with internet, largely as a country for about, 9 years, even in the hinterlands of this country, if you say tier 2, tier 3, tier 4. So, with everything in every geography, this happens, that internet brings a lot of information, right? And the first few years, people are kind of just using this information, consuming this information in various ways on their own. But after about 7-8 years, they realize that they want curation, right? They want to use internet in a certain way, right? I'll give you an example. When I went to the IIT, in 2006-7, internet was not available at homes, right? So, and IIT had this unlimited access to internet. There was a local server which had unlimited content and TV series and everything, right? And then you kind of go deep into kind of just consuming a lot of them. But at some point of time, you start using internet more constructively to kind of understand about yourself better, about your culture better, about improving your livelihood, improving your status better. So I think we are in that stage of using internet in the larger part of this country, right? The second point is that, see, at the end of the day, though people say that India speaks English as the second language, but stories are still listened or seen in their native language. See, there's something about it being called mother tongue, right? It is emotional, right? And And I think that this is the time when there was, I would say, a certain critical mass that was reached for a vernacular content on the native language listeners, right? Um, and that is what has happened, right? That a lot more native language speakers have reached a critical mass. So today, if you want to just be a content creator for a particular language, you still get a very large audience for it, right? So the internet coming in to the larger part of this country last 7 8 years, the native speakers looking for more content on their native language, and they wanting to see content which is curated, value additive, and perhaps happy to pay for it, right? Is what I would say is the reason for the consumption or the consumer to kind of grow there.
I'm glad, Prateek, you raised that point on people are probably happy to pay for content, because there is this, very formulaic approach towards content in India, that people will not pay for content. Well, the evidence to that is at best mixed. And also on the supply side, there's probably a huge gap in supply of content compared to what the demand is now. And that is why storytelling or curated content or infotainment or content that people find of utilitarian content is something where the market probably is, and this is something that you have pointed out too. My question is more towards the consumer segment, which probably is defined as or described as a broad descriptor of called the Bharat consumers. What is different in the way people in tier 2, tier 3 or the villages consume, and those are in who live in the cities? Is there a difference that you see, or what is the experience from KukuFM that you have picked up on this, Prateek?
I think I'll divide into two parts, right, Gaurav, on this one. One is that the content they see, which is or they listen to, in terms of the language, and the second thing is in terms of topics, right? And as I was saying earlier, right, that I believe that large part of this country, though, can speak in English, but would like to consume content in their native language. In this consumer story is that a far more library in terms of the native language content, right? And the second thing is that the whole there are two ways to think about it, right? And a tier 2, tier 3 town users would not be any different from a tier 1 town user. Is that you pay for something which is value additive but also exclusive, right? So if you think about it, music companies have been around and music has been available on YouTube and various other apps for free. So for you to charge for that is very, very difficult. But for somebody who wants to look at a content which is not available anywhere else, but still thinks that it is value additive, right, is something that I feel is what people are looking for. That if everything is available on internet for free, I'm not going to pay for it. But if something is value additive, now let's talk about what is value additive, right? Now, earlier we spoke about this podcast that you guys are doing around the lonely people, right? And you kind of talked about various personas of these people, right? Now, let's look at one persona that I spoke to when I was looking at KukuFM. A lift man. First of all, a lift man is a very unique persona which happens only in India. I have never seen in any other country a lift man per se, right? Who's sitting inside the lift to press the buttons, right? Now, this lift man wants to become a receptionist. What are the things that he would want to do? And he uses this time to learn about few things that he can learn on KukuFM or any other podcast, in terms of maybe learning English languages, learning how to kind of respond to customers, say thank you, learning etiquettes and things like that. So that's one thing, right? Second thing is just learning about our culture, our various great leaders who we had in our culture. There are not enough stories and there are not enough supply available, right? Like if you want to learn about Shivaji Maharaj, or if you want to learn about Dr. Ambedkar, if I want to learn more about Mahatma Gandhi in the audio format. See, many of these people are not very comfortable with reading, right? But they want to learn more about that as they understand that these are people who came from backgrounds like theirs and became great, right? So I think these are some of these things, right? Where how do I become better? How do I kind of really leapfrog my current socioeconomic status to the next socioeconomic status, right? A housewife trying to learn how to become a better mother or a better parent because she understands that, she really needs to work on her parenting skills, which was not the case earlier, right? So these are the kind of content what we think is kind of getting a lot more attention, and there is need for people to kind of become better and things like that. But there is also a lot of content on just entertainment and romantic stories and just generally fun stories as well, right? Which is what our behavior would be of a tier one audience on Netflix, where you will see a documentary as well, but you'll also see a just a fun romantic movie or a rom-com and things like that. So that's like what I would say a long answer to the kind of content consumption pattern I'm seeing. But a large part of that consumption pattern is relatable stories of people who have made it big, and how can they make it big? How can they become better at what they are doing in different personas of being a father, mother, good son, a good investor, and things like that.
Absolutely, Pratik. No, you made a very fine point on how audio actually breaks down the literacy barrier, because people are listening in the language that they think, particularly in Indian languages, and which is why the potential is, there's demonstrable evidence of the potential, and once the supply gets created, I think business models will fall in place. But I wanted to know something about the price dynamics and the pain points for consumers in tier 2, tier 3 and villages. What is their appetite for paying for consuming content in languages, particularly in audio streaming? Prateek?
So Gaurav, in my opinion, I think we are discovering this. My understanding is that it will evolve as the other entertainment industries have evolved, right? If you look at our box office collection, we have a most, I would say, evolved and mature film industry, which kind of is known globally as well as in the country. So they have a decent amount of revenue in terms of just customers paying for content. And even if you look at the native language speakers, the craziness and the whole appetite to pay for content in native languages, Telugu film industry, Tamil film industry is much higher, I would say, right? The same goes for if you look at how the pay channels came in, right? When we moved from Doordarshan world to the Star and the Z TVs of the world, it kind of was for the longest time a free content, and then there was this content which came in with the K serials and many other things where the pay channels kind of came in, right? So I think there is an appetite for payment, and Tata Sky's numbers and the Dish TV numbers are public. So I think there is an appetite for paying for content, but is this like a infinitely large market today? I don't think so. It is, I would say, a decently mid-sized market, but I would say this is growing very fast. Today we have about 3 to 4 OTT platforms which have more than 30 million paying customers, right? So I think the propensity to pay for Indian audience for content, for the native language speakers for content is high. Just to give an example, e-Nadu is perhaps more expensive than a Times of India, both from per square inches of advertisement, right? So my understanding is that the native language speakers are perhaps have a higher propensity to pay for the language content that they are listening to. But this market is growing. That number today could be $1 to $2 a month kind of a number, and largely on a subscription economy method rather than actually pay right away, because I think it'll also be like very similar to how the sachet economy in the FMCG world kind of went about. And with technology, with UPI in India, all of this is possible. So I think it will not be like a lump sum one-time pay kind of a economy. It will be pay per listen, pay for monthly subscriptions kind of a model.
Absolutely. How fast is the market segment growing? This market segment?
I think this market segment, in my opinion, is growing at about greater than 60% year on year.
Okay. And, do you think the business models are sustainable? Do you think startups, including us, could actually sustain this kind of a business model based on the potential of the language market? Given the fact you cited the example of Inadu, and people are willing to pay more for Inadu than, say, for an English language newspaper or a television channel, kind of serves as a proxy about people's appetite to pay for content in their local languages, which they might find it of utility, or, as you used the term, additive value. Do you think that's a fair enough assessment to make for people to actually jump headlong into subscription-based models for audio streaming content in languages? Because this also requires deep capital in commitment, isn't it, Prateek?
Yeah, I think fair point, Gaurav, right? And I break it down to two parts. Are you a content generation company or are you a content distribution company, right? I think content generation companies will be profitable, right? And many of them, they'll each find their own niche. They'll each find their own languages. And they can be very, very profitable because content generation per se in audio platform is less expensive than what I talked about, let's say a film production or even a OTT production, right? With a visual OTT production. Audio content per se is less expensive, if I may say so, right? But if you're trying to build a distribution company, right? I think there'll not be many distribution companies. There'll be few distribution companies which will plug into very many of these content production companies. But I really believe that the content production companies themselves could be very, very profitable. But it could be a hit and miss kind of a business, right? Because you may not be always be able to produce a hit content. You have to kind of research more. So, but it'll be less in terms of scale, but can be really good profitable companies. But the platform or the distribution companies will be far few. I would say perhaps one or two. And there could be some who just perhaps be great in one language or multiple languages. But that will require a lot of money. And that is where we have kind of taken a bet on something like a KukuFM, where they are building a distribution company along with a content company, generation company. But their content generation will also enable the other content players to come in and distribute on their platform.
So Kuku is a mix of both. It's a content creator as well as a distributor, isn't it?
Yeah, so they partner with a lot of content creators to kind of come in because they have a lot of insights on their platform. So they can give those insights to the platform to various content creators and then partner with them. But they're essentially a platform to distribute contents of all kinds. And I think the beauty of content, right, because it's art, it cannot be concentrated by one team, right? Even if you look at OTTs, right, they partner with multiple production companies, right, where they buy out rights and they distribute this through their own platform. What will work for platform companies or distribution companies is the insights of multiple kinds of audience and what will work and what will not work, and then partner with the content creators to kind of give them those insights and use those creative things to distribute on their platform.
And finally, Prateek, what is Fundamentum Partnership's thesis and plans for this segment?
So I think we don't really have a very specific thesis to only invest in audio content companies. But I think that internet has now become very, very, it's almost like electricity across the country, right? So a lot of business models, which will be India first, will be created. We have had the past 10 years a lot of business models which were copied from global comparables or, things like that. So our thesis is that every time a company does something which is very, very deeply rooted to Bharat, deeply rooted to how Indians think and Indians work, there will be a large outcome. It may not be apparent to the eyes in the first go, which is what KukuFM was, right? When we first looked at KukuFM, it was almost like, will Indians pay for content? And they have shown that they've grown to about 3 million paying subscribers so quickly, and they're only growing. But there are many such areas where internet will be a great enabler, but the Indian entrepreneur will really think from first principle point of view on what this country's larger audience will really pay for, will really help them build a sustainable business. And there could be skilling, there could be jobs, there could be entertainment, travel, many such things which is aligned to the larger Indian consumption story. And that is what our thesis is, that a lot of Bharat users will tell us what they really would like to pay for, what would they really get their attention, and that is what we want to invest in.
Thank you, Prateek, for these deep insights and sharing your wonderful perspectives on various aspects, including the subscription economy, which way the market is going, how the Indian market, because of its diversity, offers a lot of potential, and how it is, contrary to popular belief, there seems to be a lot of appetite among people, both in tier 2, tier 3 and villages, to spend on content that they find useful and value additive. Thanks for taking the time out and dropping by to have this conversation.
Thank you, Gaurav, for your time. I really enjoyed the conversation, and thank you.